In our prior videos, we talked about how to go from bamboo pieces into a limb blank. And then we took from a limb blank to basically a limb shape, drilling holes, cutting. Okay, in this video, we're going to talk about our basically what type of surface treatment do we put on these limbs. This is an aspect of the car build that you've got the most flexibility. You can incorporate what we show you here, and like everything else, you can experiment with your own. You can take scrap pieces of bamboo and try some different things and find out what works best for your taste. Okay, for starters, we're going to take where we ended off with our last video and do some final sanding. Okay. Recall in our first video, when we built up our bamboo limb, we've got the top two layers, the grain is going this direction. The bottom two layers, the grain is going the same two direction. But in the middle, we've got pieces where the grain's in this direction. In some cases, we've got multiple pieces in the center section. If you didn't get everything pushed together tightly, you might have a gap somewhere along in the center of the limb. We've not seen that being an issue. The top section is in compression when the limb's loaded up, and the bottom is in tension. The center portion really is more towards the neutral axis and is really to give the limb strength in this direction. So a small gap here is typically only cosmetic. So you may want to go ahead and fill this up with a wood filler, and you should be good to go. Okay, we removed all of our pencil marks, any burn marks that happened from when we used the router or when we used the saw, and we feel generally pretty comfortable with this. Okay, I really don't see the need for a conditioner to, let's say, to even out the grain of the wood. Bamboo takes a stain very well. I think it's a lot like oak in the way it takes a stain, and the way it cuts, and the way it sands. Okay, your last step is just cleaning things up with a clean cloth and getting ready for a stain of your choice. Okay, applying stain. Take a look at the directions, it never hurts. But applying stain is pretty flexible. It can be by a brush, by a rag like we're doing here. It can even be spray on. You don't need to worry about it getting the stain actually in the holes. Whether it gets in there or not really doesn't matter. Cover the whole limb. Recall with stain, the longer you leave it on, the darker it's going to be. Where technique's really important is our next step when we're applying the polyurethane. But stain's pretty forgiving. The holes work well to hang the part up to dry. We recommend just leaving it overnight. You may want to stain all your limbs at once, all 4 limbs. Here we're obviously just going to work with one. There's no difference between one and how you handle one and the next one. Okay, we're going to put this away, hang it up, and pick it up tomorrow with our applying the polyurethane. Okay, our stain is dried overnight. Let's go ahead and take a look at things before we move into the polyurethane. Here's our limb. It looks good. The stain is rather consistent. There's a few areas where it looks maybe a little bit of variation. For the true perfectionist, you may want to experiment with some conditioner on some sample pieces before you move to your actual limbs. One thing, you do not want to shake polyurethane. That just adds bubbles. So you just want to stir gently, figure eights, whatever. The other thing is with the polyurethane, if you use an oil-based stain, you want to use an oil-based polyurethane. And also if you use a water-based stain, you want to do the same, a water-based polyurethane. Okay, let's go ahead. One thing we recommend doing is the inside of the holes. Recall the stain only adds color. The polyurethane adds protection. One thing we started doing is just applying a very thin amount of polyurethane inside the holes. What this does is it seals it. In the event of any sort of moisture, if your car's out in the rain overnight, you don't need to worry about moisture getting in underneath the fasteners. Okay. Now with polyurethane, it's good to apply long strokes going in the direction of the grain. Notice I dip this into the polyurethane, just about a half an inch. We don't want too much on the brush. Also, my preference is to use a brush. Others gravitate towards the foam brushes versus a bristle brush. I think the foam brushes, they might be more vulnerable to just bubbles on the part. So the big challenge is managing just runs on the part, as far as the too much polyurethane, or actually starts to, as the part dries, it runs. Another practice is to save the part you're going to see the most, or the section of your part, whatever you're going to see most, do that last. That way you can really focus on that area. Okay. As I do this, it's getting harder and harder to hold the part. You can use something through the holes to kind of hold it while you apply the polyurethane. Also, between coats, I would let it sit overnight or 8 hours, depending on how humid and the air temperature. A lot of the limb really is not going to be visible. The end in here is going to be bolted underneath the aluminum plate. People really won't be able to see that. This portion in here is going to be highly visible. Again, long strokes. Try not to get too much on. And again, around the holes, it's just very vulnerable for a run to begin. Okay, we have polyurethane on our first part. We have one coat on. We typically recommend a minimum of 2. We usually use 3. Also, do a light sanding with a 220 grit sandpaper between coats. That should give you a nice finish. Anyway, thank you for watching, and happy car building.